Instances when biblical figures broke the law. Romans 13 tells us that we should be subject to the governing authorities, but this doesn't necessarily mean that one should go against God's law. In fact, the opposite is true, for no authority exists except by God's permission. The Bible has many examples of civil disobedience, where men and women broke the law. But how righteous were they in doing so? Click on and draw your own conclusions. The Hebrew housewives disobey the Pharaoh. This story can be found in the book of Exodus. The Egyptian king commands the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill Hebrew baby boys at birth. The Hebrew housewives disobey the Pharaoh. Both Shiphrah and Puah refused to do it. They told the Pharaoh that Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. But they refused to obey the order because they feared God. Exodus 1:15-22. The parents of Moses hide him. Exodus 2:1-2 tells us that the parents of Moses hid him for 3 months after his birth. They did so to protect him from the Pharaoh's decree to kill male babies. The parents of Moses hide him. The explanation for this is later found in Hebrews 11:23, which reads, "By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict." Elijah challenges King Ahab. In 1 Kings 18, prophet Elijah challenges King Ahab and the false prophets. In verse 17, the king calls the prophet the troubler of Israel, to which he replied, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." This was a defying thing to say. Jonathan breaks a fasting law. Jonathan was caught by his father's men who told him, "Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats food today.'" The soldiers did not obey Saul in the end, and Jonathan lived. Jonathan was caught by his father's men who told him, "Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats food today.'" The soldiers did not obey Saul in the end, and Jonathan lived. Queen Vashti refuses to be objectified. A drunken King Xerxes demanded Queen Vashti to come before him and show him her body. Queen Vashti refused to come, and the king was not happy about it. Queen Vashti paid for her disobedience. Memucan, one of the king's eunuchs, advised that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes, and that the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Esther 1:19. Mordecai refuses to kneel down. King Xerxes had promoted Haman, so he commanded his servants to bow down and pay homage to him. All the royal officials did so, but Mordecai refused to kneel down or pay him honor. Mordecai refuses to kneel down. Mordecai refused to do so because he was a Jew, and so kneeling down was a form of idolatry. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Esther 3-6. Queen Esther intervenes with the king. Mordecai, in an attempt to put a stop to the decimation of his people, asks Queen Esther, who replaced Queen Vashti, to intervene with the king. To do so was against the law, but the queen did it. "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish," she told Mordecai. Esther 4:16. 3 Jewish men refused to bow down to a statue. King Nebuchadnezzar erected a golden statue and ordered everyone to bow down to it every time a bell rang. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, however, refused to do so and were thrown into the fire. Their reply to the king was, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Daniel 3:16-18. Daniel's outlawed prayer. King Darius issued a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days shall be thrown into the lions. Daniel 6:7. Daniel didn't obey the king's decree. He prayed to God 3 times a day like he had always done. The king threw Daniel into the lion's den, but he survived because God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel 6:20. The wise men disregard King Herod's request. The foreign men who came to see Jesus also disobeyed the law. King Herod asked them to find where baby Jesus was and tell him. The plan was then to have Jesus killed. Luckily, the wise men disobeyed his request, and having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Matthew 2:12. Jesus touched a leper. Touching a leper would make one unclean, according to Jewish law. Jesus not only touched one, but he cured him of the disease. Reads Matthew 8:22-23. Working on the Sabbath. Jesus broke Jewish law again by healing people on the day no work should be done. Matthew 12:10-13. Jesus also defended his apostles for breaking the same law when they began to pick up heads of grain from a field. The Pharisees asked him why they were doing something unlawful on Sabbath days. Jesus told them, "The Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Talking to women. Talking to a woman without her father or husband around was a no-no in biblical times. Not only did Jesus do this multiple times, he also talked with women who were strangers, of different ethnicities, and accused of being sinners. Drinking his blood. Jewish law forbids the drinking of blood. Although Jesus did not literally break this rule, he did tell his disciples they were to drink his blood. John 6:54. Outlawed speech. According to Acts 4, Peter and John are commanded by Jewish leaders to stop preaching the gospel. The disciples of Jesus told the Jewish council leaders, "You are the judges here, so we'll leave it up to you to judge whether it is right in the sight of God to obey your commands or God's. But one thing we can tell you, we cannot possibly restrain ourselves from speaking about what we have seen and heard with our own eyes and ears." Acts 4:19. They ended up being thrown in jail. Outlawed preaching. The Bible tells us in Acts 5:17-42 that the apostles were arrested for preaching about Jesus in Jewish temples. They stood before a council and the high priest asked them, "Didn't we give you strict orders to stop teaching in this name?" Peter and the apostles replied, "If we have to choose between obedience to God and obedience to any human authority, then we must obey God." They were flogged, told to not speak in the name of Jesus, and then released.